Hello, welcome to your Syncretism class. Today we're going to be learning about how the soul descended from the monad into the sine wave, how our soul emanated from the masculine feminine monad and differentiated and descended into the sine wave, which gives us our entire spectrum of this experience. Essentially, when we physically incarnated, the secret key to the scriptures is to know that when we physically incarnated, that was actually considered death to the soul, because we came from our unlimited nature in the causal plane, in which we were already individual entities. And the death of the soul is the incarnation. And this is considered the land of dead. So essentially, we come from the monad, which is the masculine, feminine, unified black light, which then projects itself into the sine wave. And we essentially descend from this and emanate. We each have our own individual father, mother, monad. And then we have our dyad, which gives us our experience as an individual. Essentially, this is the reason why we descend here, is to know the difference between good and evil, and the knowledge between what we are as opposed to what we are not, because it's up to each individual soul to self-realize. When we fall and descend from the monad, the father, mother, monad, and descend into physical incarnation, we pick up from the 7 planets, 7 virtues, 7 qualities, 7 powers, but as well as 7 vices, and things that basically condition the soul. So essentially, the work of each human soul is to work out these 7. And to model the sine wave, you can't escape it, because it's stamped in the unconscious mind of the creator. Essentially, Walter Russell says, the secret of creation is in the wave. This is how light manifests, redshift, blue shift. Essentially, we experience birth, maturity, decline, old age, and finally resurrection. And this resurrection here is when we finally regain our consciousness outside of the fixed tomb. Because here we are in fixed earth. We have become fixed in matter, or what we'd say nailed to the cross. We've been crucified onto matter. So the secret key is that the death means physical incarnation. According to Alvin Boyd Kuhn, he has referenced many of the ancients who knew that secret to the operas, the ancient texts, as well as some of the ancient scriptures, knowing exactly that key will help you realize that, hey, death isn't so bad at all. It's actually our portal to life. And he makes some kind of a casual joke where he explains that who would have thought that, the farthest thing that death, the soul could experience of death was to incarnate into physical realm. So essentially, Mystery Taylor wrote, is someone who Alvin Boyd Kuhn is quoting, Mysteries Taylor. He writes that the Greeks believed that the human souls were confined in the body as in a prison, a condition which was denominated Genesis or generation. Let's read that again. Mysteries Taylor writes that the Greeks believed that the human souls were confined in the body as in a prison, a condition which was denominated Genesis or generation, from which Dionysus would liberate them. So as the story goes, the human body is like a shelter or a tomb for the soul that we descend into. It's figurative. It's not that it's gloomy and bad. It's just that, figuratively speaking, this life is death compared to the soul life that we had in the causal plane. So essentially, if we work out our 7 planets that we've been stamped with energetically, and we understand these 12 and how the sine wave relates to our life, we will be able to basically become alchemists and transmute this material realm into the spiritual realm through alchemy, through transmutation. Essentially, this metaphor has been used in a lot of ancient seers have noticed how water becomes ice. and that ice has to become liquid, and that liquid becomes vapor. Those vapor become clouds, and then the clouds produce lightning and thunder. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says that one way to relate to him is thunder, fragrance of the earth, or the thunder and lightning. That energy that's produced is the prime creator. Essentially, we need to transmute our ice cubes into water, the water into vapor, the vapor will become clouds, and essentially those clouds produce that spiritual energy, that effulgence. This is a metaphor for our bodies and our spiritual evolution as we descend into a dense form and we transmute ourselves up the ladder back into the supernal realms that are not dense. So essentially, Alan Kuhn goes on to state that Plato himself said that men are placed in the body as in a prison. He even considered the body as a shelter of the soul, an idea that carried one step farther the ancient Egyptians' representation of the body, personalizing the goddess Hathor as the birdcage of the soul. This imprisonment was equated with the idea of death to the soul, is clearly expressed by Marco Taylor, who, in commenting on the writings of Mark Albius, writes, "The soul in the present life may be said to die as far as it is possible for a soul to die, occultly intimating that the death of the soul was nothing more than a profound union with the ruinous bounds of the body." So hearing this in syncretism, we learn how to liberate the soul from the body. Not that we're not hating on the material realm. The material realm is actually a school and a play. Well, I would say it's like an academy for souls. It's like soul academy. It's a universal academy to learn experiences, to know what we are as opposed to what we're not. So essentially, it's good to know that our eternal real abode is in an eternal realm where we're unlimited in capacity and that we're here to gain something. So this is not for no reason. A lot of people are pushing in this age nihilistic beliefs that there's no purpose in life, that this is all just for no reason at all. So essentially, we can learn how to utilize these 7 forces of the creator and activate them within the body, transmuting the vices into virtues one by one or all at once. Essentially, throughout our lives, we're given trial and error. Things are good, and then we experience the lows, and the rhythm brings us back to the highs. These trials and errors are basically the wilderness. The ancient scriptures talk about the wilderness. We are in the wilderness, learning, experiencing, trying to overcome trial and error so that we can become acquainted with ourselves. So essentially, let's take a look into George W. Carey and what he had to say. There we go. Essentially, the creator created a workshop, and the workshop is the sine wave and our descent into the material realm so that we can have an experience, so that we can gain individuality and take this back with us. So essentially, George W. Carey goes on to say, "We are all the operators or workmen in the divine workshop, and the divine intelligence, or the central it, made no mistake in placing any of us here, but does insist that we recognize that now is the time, and here is the place to do our best." So essentially, the creator has manifested this material realm and has allowed us to work on ourselves as the divine project to finally become self-conscious and self-cognizant. Before we descended into the sine wave, we weren't cognizant of who exactly we were. We were just bliss, entities in bliss, Satchitananda, bliss, consciousness, existence. but we didn't have knowledge of ourselves or where we came from. We had to descend into the realm of the tomb, into the land of the dead, and completely forget ourselves. We actually merge with a creature. We will talk about how we descend into an actual formed creature that we associate with and is our soul counterpart until we move on and take it with us and be able to retain that entity, so that we can don't have to lose what we worked on. We've been working so hard. So essentially, we will be in my classes, as we go about, we will be learning how to manifest these 7 forces within the body, and how to work on them alchemically at different seasons and different times. The reason being is because, since the soul is entombed in the matter, and we are in a realm of sleep and forgetfulness, our goal is to awaken consciousness, transmute our energy, and become self-illuminated, so that we are able to navigate our way back with full cognizance of our experience. So essentially, we need to practice daily methods that will help us awaken our consciousness from moment to moment. The things of this age that are helping people wake up the most and experience the eternal realm are things like chanting, as well as self-observation. So these are 2 ways. From day to day, you could practice the mantra Om, AUM, and do it internally throughout the day. So when you're doing work, when you're doing the dishes, when you are going outside for a walk, on your way to work, while you're at work, try to make sure that throughout the day, for at least a good amount of time, that you are using this mantra Om and actually utilizing it. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is the syllable Om. If we utilize this symbol, we are utilizing the intelligence of Krishna, and that Krishna is the monad. That monad is the highest intelligence. That is the prime cause. So essentially, we can merge with this and experience difference, separation, while being merged in union at the same time. So in union, but separate. Essentially, self-observation and the mantra Om, used as an actual practice on a daily, weekly basis, will help you awaken the consciousness and essentially experience a self-auto realization. So at first, when you do the mantra Om, it's going to feel a little bit numb, a little bit barren, but as you develop the practice, you'll be able to actually hear yourself Om. You'll catch a glimpse of the person that actually is observing the person that's saying Om. Om. So by working with this mantra on a day-to-day basis, we can actually be able to use it as an anchor, to anchor our consciousness in the present moment, to awaken it, so that we can begin to come out of this tomb, because we're enveloped in the 4 elements, and being encased in this tomb that we call life, which is actually death to the soul, makes it so that our consciousness is enveloped by matter and elements, and it is very apt to delusion, confusion, lust for material senses. So we need to use sound and mantra, especially Om, on a day-to-day basis internally, as we are going to the store, as we're doing our errands, before we're completing our duties. And if we make this a practice for at least a couple of weeks, we can then begin to experience profound states of awakening, so that we can actually realize that we are a soul, light, trapped. I wouldn't say trapped, but are currently living in a body, essentially. So this is one technique that's going to help you if you do it on a weekly basis and actually use the mantra Om, not only when you meditate for an hour or half an hour in the mornings or evenings, but throughout your entire routine throughout the day. Essentially, this is going to be a very good practice to start the process of awakening from this self-through of the soul. And essentially, when you're doing the mantra Om, you're pulling yourself out of this dualistic red shift, blue shift, and you're actually merging or witnessing from this standpoint. So this is where you want to live here, so that you can have full recognition of all 12 of the intelligences that are within you and how they're working and operating. So essentially, the mantra Om is going to be the first practice that we delve into to awaken consciousness from the self through the soul. It's just going to be an esoteric practice done completely in head, invisible from anyone outside, simply Om inaudibly, so you don't have to use your mouth. So essentially, when the soul descended through the planets and gained the 7 forces, we acquire a zodiac. And now our mission is to fill out our ability to learn from our lessons of life here and to activate our inner talents and gifts, and finally merge from the tomb resurrected. This is the mysteries of the sun, the mysteries of the scriptures, so that you can understand that in the same way that the solar orb in the sky gives birth to itself, does its duties through sacrifice and trial, and then has its crucifixion, death, and then finally the resurrection. This is essentially the template or blueprint for our souls on our initiatory developmental journey through this wilderness. So essentially, through syncretism and understanding the SAAMBEST model and how we will be going over and corresponding to the 7 planets, as well as the 12 intelligences and how to activate these according to raising the chrism, activating them through mantras, through self-observation, we can come to a point where we finally awaken and we no longer are perturbed and rattled by this material nature that the soul is so much attracted to. So essentially, this will be the information that can help you gain control over your mind if it's completely, at a point in initiation. It could be really hard to say, hey, I'm going to take up a discipline when our minds are scattered and are unable to focus, are unable to awaken. We slip into fantasy or daydreams throughout the day, every day. And through this mantra Om and self-observation from moment to moment by watching ourselves, we can slowly pull ourselves out of this so that day by day, we begin to experience a continuation of consciousness. And this continuation of consciousness, which is this part of the sine wave, because it's not infiltrated by red shift and blue shift, which is thinking, this is knowing. And once we become knowing, we are able to take control over this body, dominate our 4 elements with our spirit, and essentially bring what George W. Carey was trying to explain, that now is the time for perfection. That if we can live a perfect day, we can live a perfect week, and that perfect week can transpire to a perfect month. And that perfect month will allow our bodies to transmute and activate and embody more soul energy. There's very possible that your body's here, but it's not embodying your entire soul or individual conscious self. Essentially, these practices help you embody that, because you can go on your whole day completely automated automaton, with daydreams, no regards, and just reacting to your environment. But using these techniques and understanding the sine wave and how it relates to your life, it will actually able to pull you out of this routine. So essentially, let's see. Every so-called thing, whether it be animal, vegetable, or mineral, molecule or atom, ion or electron, is the result of the one intelligence expressing itself in different rates of motion. Then what is spirit? Spirit is the breath of life. Spirit is that which is breathed into man, must be intelligence, or man would not be intelligent. Non-intelligent substance, which is of course unthinkable, would not breathe into anything, nor make it intelligent if it did. Therefore, we see that the spirit, intelligence, and matter are one and the same essay in different rates of motion. So essentially, the creator is full of intelligence. It's not impersonal in the fact that everything has intelligence, even this material realm. But the one that resides outside of the material realm is fully conscious of what it did when it created each one of us. And each one of us has an exact purpose that we can incarnate and actually develop if we were to just allow the process to happen. However, because we're in the material modes of nature, we get in the way of ourselves and disrupt this process. And this is why we can actually fail in becoming our highest talent, our highest compassion, our highest love, our highest state of giving. You know, we can become greedy. We can become enveloped in lust. We can completely forget who we are. And these are remedies that are going to help so that doesn't happen and we can take control. So essentially, what we need, a couple of points that we need to understand is that the sine wave emanates from the causal plane. The monad, which is the one unified male and female combined living personal conscious causal entity or being, and emanates the dyad. And we as individual emanations of that have our origin in the primum mobile, which is eternity. We descend the 7 planets into matter, and our being becomes entangled in the material counterpart of its divine subtle essence of light. The soul loves matter. It is attracted to this realm, and we become conscious of the dyad. Through this duality, we become conscious of the monad. This is our ability to self-awaken. Life is full of meaning and purpose. It is not a nihilistic universe where we just come here randomly, have no purpose to fulfill, and we're simply tossed from event to event with no recollection, right? It's not what you gain here in the material realm, but the invisible inherent qualities that you gain as you ascend. Good and evil, now that we bit the apple, biting the apple refers to physical incarnation. When the soul incarnates into matter on one level, that means the soul is actually incarnating into the material realm of good and evil. So essentially, now that we have bit the apple of physical incarnation, we have the opportunity to rise back up with full cognizance of now who we are and who we are not. So we can take opportunity on a day-to-day basis to understand what this world is bringing us a lot of things right now that are very disturbing. And this is going to help us wake us up to understand what we are not, because we can only understand through its opposite. So essentially, we can transmute and become alchemists and take these negative experiences that happen to us and use them as a reflection to understand that it is going to show us who we are not, so we understand who we are. And then that is when we have to take action, once we have full cognizance of that. So when we descend from the monad, we actually descend into the sine wave, which is the mind of the creator. We descend into the mind of God. The place that we live is a realm. It's a total realm. It's not a specific place or dot. It is a realm. And we are realm dwellers. We are physical realm dwellers, and we have a part of us that is actually unmanifested as well. But the part of us that's physical, we're dwelling in a physical realm. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that there is never a time where you or I did not exist. So essentially, as eternal individual conscious entities that descend from the monad, when we were in the monad, we had complete unification. We were one. We had our separate individual existence by default. The creator or the eternal prime cause is eternal. It never had a beginning or end. Just by its simple being of the one, it formed the many, and we are the many. So essentially, when he says that, there's never a time where we didn't exist, there's never a time where we didn't exist, but now we exist with cognizance and consciousness because we've descended into the sine wave and understood the 12 holy perspectives of the sun and the witness, so that we can understand ourselves and actually know, because before that we were part of the one, part of the causal effulgence with no beginning or end. So essentially we had no reference point. So essentially, each one of us has been eternal, and our birth in eternity in counter space, the invisible realm, that is our appearance in here. So like when our spirit souls give us birth, they take us from the monad realm, take us out into the spirit, and we descend and become into the physical encasements. So boom, we're kind of like we have like two parents. We're have a spirit, we're eternal in the monad, and then when we form and create like our personality soul, or from our spiritual counterparts, our divine personal Krishna and Radha, or Jesus and Mary Magdalene, this forms an entity. And now that entity is born, first birth, and the second birth, boom, death. It dies, descends into the material realm. I know it's confusing, right? Because death is this life and life is the life hereafter, because this is actually the death of the soul. So essentially, we appear here in the material realm as conscious entities. We wake up for 16 hours a day, and we're responsible to operate this elemental entity. And when it's not in operation, we merge back into counter space. So our conscious souls, like sparks from a flame, descend to know each individual self as a separate or form from the direct emanation of the first cause. Each soul manifesting in the world of dualities takes on the work of transmutation, allowing the consciousness to manifest as stable earth. So essentially, we take this unlimited entity and we bulk it down into like a cross or a fitting or a material tomb. We become earth. And from that earth, we have a mind, body, personality, which are counterparts of the material realm. The witness and the being are kind of out here. And then we have our encasement that kind of hovers around it. We're separate from it. So essentially, based on the two eternal number archetypes, the soul individual is put through experience to go back up the spheres while blossoming the qualities of the soul and transmuting the 7 vices into virtues in order for it to know what it is. The goal is to know ourselves. So through these alchemical practices of observing ourselves moment to moment, working on transmuting our vice into virtues every day, we are able to take control over what's uncontrollable. Our physical natural impulses are always taking us here and there. They seem to be automatic. So we have to take what is not automatic, what is fixed and eternal, and use it to navigate and spiritualize what is not fixed, what is mutable and uneternal, which is this material realm. Like George W. Carey said, this is God. This is the creator's workshop, and we're the workmen. The process that nature intended is very spiritual, and it is supposed to take place very naturally on its own. It's trying to make it so that our individual selves in matter of this tomb auto-realize, understand where it came from, crystallize its consciousness and experiences, and return to the eternal realm with unlimited consciousness. So essentially, on one level, the holy books or the sun books explain the various levels of initiation in the life of the soul. So when the Bible or these holy books are talking about like physical creation or creation of the material realm, on one level it's talking about that. But on another level, it's actually talking about creation of the spiritual realm, of the spiritual monad counter space realm, or the emanation of that before this material creation was formed. So essentially on one level, the Bible is talking about the various layers of life. On one level, it's the body. The next level, it's the celestials and the solar, the planets and the sun. And it's also talking about creation before the creation, the spiritual birth of the soul. So that descent of the soul into the tomb or the womb, like Alvin Boyd Kuhn explains, is basically our heroic journey of conquering death. So we have nothing to fear, guys. Through transmutation, we are given the gift of life and are able to do the great work. So our lives and our heroic stories are all based on the ecliptic and the sine wave. Everything is the same holographically because we're literally part of the first cause. There's a part of you that is unmanifested and resides in the invisible realm. So there's a part of us that's actually living in counter space right now. When you do the mantra Om on a weekly basis and day-to-day basis, identify with the part of you that is not manifested in the physical body. This part of you is the part of you that is not associated or affiliated or is harmed or has any turbulence or trouble from being encased in the material realm. If we can activate this, exercise it, practice Om on a day-to-day basis while being cognizant of ourselves, we can activate this and then begin to identify with it. That's how we move from the consciousness of earth to water. And we start identifying with soul. In the Greek stages of consciousness, we go from earth, water, air, to fire. From the most dense to the most subtle. So let's take advantage of this practice so that we can definitely kickstart the alchemical process and begin to awaken from this. Essentially, there is your mental body that connects you to your physical self. So we know about the unmanifested part of you that resides in the monad. And then you have the manifested part of you that's manifested in the dyad. Essentially, this is where the physical shell or the lower ego resides. The lower ego or personality is basically an anchor for the soul. And it's the player game. It's the game. It's the character in the matrix, right? It's the character of the matrix, whereas you are the player. The monad is the player of the game. The player of the game's never inside the game. It's always the character and the player are separate. So essentially, at this plane is the mid garden. So the plane that we live in the physical realm is the mid garden. It's in between here, the heavens, and the lower realms. Heavens, mid garden, lower realms. So essentially, this plane is where we acquire the 7 forces or planets or archangels. The 7 planets are the archangels, and these are the qualities that we are gifted with on our journey. And then finally, we have the 12 zodiac or the 12 intelligences, which give us our ability to essentially operate with purpose and existence. You know, each zodiac sign from Aries to Pisces has its own perspective, its own way of practicing yoga, its own way of practicing the holy sciences. Or even having different trials in life. So essentially, this is the purpose of creation, to give us a reference point of who we are as opposed to who we're not, so that we could finally go back with full cognizance. So essentially, this is going to be part 1 lesson. And the next thing that we're going to be going into is basically the 12, how these relate to the Christian scriptures, to the 12 apostles, and how each of the apostles relates to a different aspect or quality of consciousness, and how you can develop these powers one by one throughout the year. So throughout your life, one by one, month by month, there's 12 archetypes, 12 months, working on one a month throughout the years will develop beautiful qualities in the soul, especially if you're conscious of it, right? Because this happens on an unconscious level, but it's, you know, slow. When you're at a good mature age of soul development, you can be aware of what the creator is up to, and you can see these patterns and then go along with it and be like, okay, hop on board. But if you're not cognizant of it, it kind of, things just happen. You think they're random. So nothing's random ever. So we'll be learning about the 12 spiritual powers and how to incarnate those, how to develop those. I'll also be going over some more practices, and I hope you guys enjoyed this class, and be looking forward to going over the next steps with you guys. If you have any questions, please follow the the ways to post those, and I'll be glad to help. Thank you so much. Have a good one.